I rise today to talk about a couple of areas where I think we can make great progress on legislation before the end of the year. This has been a legislative session in which we've passed a number of important bills, and I think there's more we can do. And specifically, I'm going to talk about some legislative initiatives that will give a leg up to American workers, Ohio workers, also help our families and help our students. I will start with students. There's an opportunity here over the next couple of weeks for us to ensure that we reauthorize the Perkins Loan Program. Perkins is an incredibly important program, particularly for low-income students. Of all the student loan programs out there, Perkins is by far, in my view, the most flexible. And this is an urgent matter because if we don't pass an extension, new loans will not be rewarded, even in January, as students start this next semester. So let's not allow college tuition to become even less affordable for low-income students. Let's ensure that they can get a college degree, pursue their dreams, and that we do move forward with this Perkins reauthorization. I spoke about this on the floor a month or so ago, and I talked about it as a program that was incredibly important for students in my state. I talked about the fact that there are 60 schools in the Buckeye State in Ohio who have received loans from this program. And over the last school year, more than 25,000 Ohio students received financial aid through Perkins, including about 3,000 students at Kent State University and about 1,700 students at The Ohio State University. I was in Columbus last weekend, had a chance to meet with some Ohio State students who care a lot about this. They want to ensure that this Perkins is going to be there for them so that they can stay in school. Some of them already have help from other programs, but they know that if they don't have the Perkins loan program, they can't afford to make ends meet and to stay in school. It's really important. I've also heard from our college presidents from around the state, particularly from Dr. Beverly Warren from Kent, who was here just a couple weeks ago to talk to me about this, and Dr. Michael Drake, who I saw last week at Ohio State. They want to ensure that their students have this possibility. One of the students I've talked to is named Carrie Richmond. Carrie is a junior at Kent State. She interned in my office this past summer. Carrie was an incredible intern. She is a student who is working hard. In fact, she's at Kent State, likely to graduate a little bit early. She spent her teenage years going from foster home to foster home. She fought the odds, but she's now excelling in college. She's bright, she's ambitious, but even with her Pell Grant, she has to have that Perkins loan in order to be able to stay in school, in order to make ends meet. So this is an important program, but it's not about a program or it's not about numbers, it's about people. It's about Carrie Richmond and others like her. And of course, the impact goes well beyond Ohio. Over 1,700 colleges and universities participate across the country in this program. Low-income students everywhere rely on it. And if it's expired, again, it's only more difficult to pay for school. Instead, what we should be doing here in the Senate is making it easier, not harder, to afford to go to school. Some of these tuitions have gone up and up. We've got to be sure that every kid has this chance to be able to get ahead by going to college or university. If we don't move, by the way, students who have previously received Perkins loan will lose their eligibility if they change institutions or academic programs. So it's a big deal to them. And if we don't act soon, of course, students who are seeking loans for the winter and spring semesters will be ineligible. In total, it's possible that 150,000 freshmen will lose their eligibility this coming fall. We can't let that happen. So let's not allow college tuition to become this roadblock for low-income students who are looking for a college degree. Let's give them this chance. Let's give them this opportunity. And by the way, let's extend it, but at the same time, work on ways to improve the program. I know there's some members here on my side of the aisle, and I think on the other side as well, but certainly on my side of the aisle, who have said they have concerns about some of these student loan programs, would like to reform them to make them work better. That's great. Let's take the time to do that. But in the meantime, let's not eliminate this program and have these kids fall between the cracks. I'm there on the reforms. I'd like to help on that. I think we can do better for all of our student loan programs and to help all of our kids be able to have a better chance to succeed. But let's not create this terrible uncertainty for these students in the meantime. Let's extend this program and then work on those reforms. I want to thank Senator Casey, Senator Baldwin, Senator Collins, and others for their strong leadership on this. And I want to ask my colleagues in the Senate to do simply what the House has done and do an extension of this program. The House has already passed this legislation. There's no reason it shouldn't be in the omnibus legislation. And there's no reason we shouldn't move forward with ensuring that these kids have the certainty they need to be able to stay in school. Second issue I want to talk about is that while students get the education they need, we've also got to ensure that the communities they're going back to are safe and make sure those communities can thrive and grow. One of the issues we have in Ohio, and unfortunately in too many neighborhoods all around this country, is that you have a lot of blight, a lot of homes that have been abandoned. And two things happen. One, when homes are abandoned, they become a magnet for crime, for drugs, for other criminal activity, to the point that they're dangerous for the community. But second, they drive the cost of the other houses down, sometimes by as much as 80%. You think about it, if you're in a community where you've got a beautiful home, you're taking care of it, but your neighbor's house becomes abandoned and becomes a magnet for crime and an eyesore, it drives all of the property values down. So here in the Congress, we have spent a lot of money, taxpayer money, on helping the people to deal with their mortgages when they're underwater, particularly after the financial crisis. But we ought to focus more, in my view, on also taking down these abandoned homes and creating safer neighborhoods, but also through market forces, allowing the property values of all these homes to increase. I think this is an honorable effort, and it's one that a lot of people are focused on now around the country. I don't think we're quite caught up to where our neighborhoods are here in Washington, D.C., because when I go home to Ohio, I hear about this all the time. We've got about 80,000 of these dangerous abandoned homes in Ohio. And again, to address public safety concerns and tumbling home values in these struggling neighborhoods, one of the best alternatives is to demolish these abandoned structures. Sometimes, by the way, another structure can be rebuilt there, of course. That's what we want. We want more economic development in these communities. In some cases I've seen where there's an abandoned home, it was torn down and it was made into a community garden, and the community can all participate. But the point is to get these homes down so we can have the redevelopment we all want. I've walked the streets with local officials in Cleveland and Warren, Ohio, in Lima, Ohio, and Toledo, Ohio, and seen these problems firsthand. And as I do that, I talk to the residents, and I ask them what they think. And you can imagine the response I get. First, for them, it's an eyesore, it's a danger for their kids or grandkids. But second, they're worried about their property values. I had one occasion to speak to someone in Toledo, Ohio, that was particularly concerning to me. This was a woman who had 3 kids. Her home was right next to an abandoned home, literally feet away, 6 or 7 feet away, sort of like a row house almost. She said, "Rob, every night I go to bed worrying that the home next to me, which is abandoned, is going to be torched by arsonists." Because at that point in time, this was in Toledo, Ohio, there was about 1 arson a night, where these abandoned homes were not just targets for crime, but they were also being used by arsonists as practice for burning down a home. She was worried about her kids. She was worried she couldn't go to sleep at night because if that home caught fire next to her, her home could be next. So this is something that we ought to focus on, and we can focus on. Land banks in some of our hardest hit areas of Ohio, Michigan, other states have gotten to work on attacking this problem. They've done a great job. They don't have the resources they need to demolish as many properties as they would like to help some of these struggling neighborhoods, and that's why these land banks have come to us and said, "Can you help us a little more?" After talking to them, after visiting these neighborhoods, we did take action. We authored a legislation called the Neighborhood Safety Act back in 2013, which was a bipartisan effort and a bicameral effort. In the House, you had members like Dave Joyce, Marcy Kaptur, Marcia Fudge working on this. Our legislation called for what's called the hardest hit funds to be used not just to help people pay down their mortgages, but also to help people to be able to knock down these abandoned homes. We pushed it aggressively, and this important change was actually made administratively. And it's provided nearly $66 million in Ohio and around the country to deal with these thousands of abandoned homes in our state. Michigan also got funds, as did other states. Now, in many of these states, these hardest hit funds have run out. In other words, there are more abandoned homes than there is money to be able to deal with the problem. But given the success rate we have and the fact these land banks are doing a great job, we think it's time to provide some more funding. And that's what we propose to do in the Omnibus Appropriations Bill. I'm working with Senator Stabenow, Senator Brown, and others to transfer funds from what's called the Home Affordable Modification Program, the HAMP program, which is a program that would be eliminated under our proposal, and shift some of those funds into the hardest hit funds for demolition purposes. I have repeatedly discussed this issue with our leadership, Senator McConnell and others, our leadership here on the committees in the Senate and in the House, and I'm very hopeful this can be done before year end. It's the right thing to do. It's an opportunity for us to be able to shift some of these funds from a program that is not working as well into a program we know works, and to be able to make progress in some of our struggling neighborhoods in Ohio and around the country. I want to give special thanks to these land banks in Ohio who have taken the lead on this issue back home. Particularly, I want to thank the tireless efforts of Jim Rackauckus. Jim is the director of Thriving Communities Initiative at the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, and he's done excellent work in helping to lead this effort and highlight this issue. I hope we can get this done even in the next week here, Mr. President, to be able to help our communities in Ohio and around the country. Finally, while we talk about keeping our communities safe and talk about the need to help our students, we also have to be sure that we're helping our workers, ensure that we're protecting jobs in our states that are threatened by unfairly traded imports. I'm pleased that we will soon be voting to pass the conference report for what's called the Customs Bill. And my understanding is this is something that may come up as early as Monday or Tuesday next week. Hope we can pass that here in the Senate and send it to the President for his signature. There are a number of aspects to the Customs Bill that I support, but one I think is really important, and it's legislation that is called the Enforce Act to ensure that we're enforcing our laws properly. This is on the heels of legislation we already passed as part of Trade Promotion Authority earlier this year. That legislation is called the Level the Playing Field Act. Sherrod Brown, Senator Brown, my colleague from Ohio, and I authored this legislation. It's now a part of our law and ammunition we can use against unfairly traded imports, and it's already working because it's already been signed into law, and it's helping to deal with either dumping when people are selling it below their costs or unfairly subsidized imports. It's helping workers in Ohio. It's helping our tire workers. It's helping our paper workers. It's helping our steel workers, and we're proud of that. But the problem is that although the legislation we've already passed, the Level the Playing Field, helps with regard to taking on countries that are sending their products here unfairly, sometimes those countries then decide to try to evade the provisions we put in place, the higher tariffs, say, for their dumped products or the higher tariffs for their subsidized products. That's what the Enforce Act is about. It's about ensuring that although we have this legislation in place, that countries and their companies don't go around those regulations and still try to get product here into the United States by illegally either sending it through another country or relabeling the product so that it doesn't fall under the tariffs that might be levied against them. So I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to pass this additional legislation. It's incredibly important, as I said, for Ohio, but it's also important for the country. Time after time, we have seen that once we put these protective orders in place against these unfairly traded imports, these countries continue to illegally enter our country through illegal transshipments to other countries, or again, through relabeling these products. So I think we have an opportunity here to move forward on something that is really important to help protect workers, to ensure that we can closely examine these schemes and stop them. This effort, by the way, is backed by the National Association of Manufacturers. It's also backed by the American Iron and Steel Institute. It's also backed by the United Steelworkers. They're in common cause because they understand that this is so critical for us to ensure that our workers get a fair shake. I got an email last week, Mr. President, from workers at Pemex Aluminum in Latonia, Ohio, in the Mahoning Valley. They've got 78 workers at their facility, and they won an important case against unfairly traded aluminum extrusions from China. As the email said, this relief really helped us. Ask unanimous consent for one additional minute, Mr. President.
Is there objection? Without objection.
These workers said, Senator Portman, this relief enabled our company to compete once again on a fair and level playing field. And that's the relief we hope to provide by enforcing our laws against this product coming in. But then they say, as a result, we recently completed an investment of $38 million to expand our facility in Latonia and create additional significant jobs. Our great concern is that this trade relief is now at risk due to the efforts by Chinese producers to avoid paying duties by, among other schemes, manipulating the alloy content of their extruded aluminum products and shipping their products to the United States under a different name. In other words, getting around the protections that are in place by simply relabeling the product. Again, this also happens by going around other countries. That's why the Enforce Act is so important. Those 78 workers at Pemex Aluminum know it's important, and they know that this legislation will help them to be able to get a fair shake. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the members of the Conference Committee on the Customs Bill for putting our BDS language into this legislation. This is to avoid boycotts and divestment and sanctions of Israel. This is a way that some countries around the world are trying to delegitimize Israel. It's something that is important for us to take a stand on as a Congress, and we do that in this customs legislation. So again, Mr. President, I think there's some good legislation we can pass here in the next week or so in the United States Senate. I hope we will do it. I thank you for giving me the time tonight. We need to continue to stand up for our families, for our students, for our workers, and ensure that indeed we do give the people we represent a fair shake.